Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really ripping the lid off the latest intelligence, specifically the Byer-Nichols threat brief for the back half of October 2025. Look, this isn't just about recapping headlines. We want to understand how the whole game has fundamentally shifted just in the last month or so. Our mission, simple. We need to quickly boil down the key changes you absolutely need to grasp. We're talking everything from, huge critical infrastructure exposure all the way to brand new tactics where attackers are actually using public blockchains to stay operational.
And honestly, if you haven't seen the raw brief yet, the initial numbers are, well, they're pretty staggering, just the sheer scale of immediate exposure. The summary kicks off with a really severe incident involving F5. Source code got stolen, right? And that seems to have directly led to over 266,000 F5 BIGIP instances being exposed, basically vulnerable to remote attacks.
Okay, I have to jump in there. 266,000 publicly reachable devices. I mean, that's practically a national security issue right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Regardless of who's attacking, that number alone should be a massive red flag for everyone.
Oh, absolutely. It should be. And the report makes a critical point, one that applies to every single organization, big or small. The core failure here isn't just the source code theft, as bad as that is. It's the fact that management interfaces for your network gear, your firewalls, load balancers, all that stuff, they should never, ever be just hanging out there on the public internet. This whole incident just confirms that sloppy network setup is, the starting point for these huge failures.
So right off the bat, we're talking about these massive foundational vulnerabilities, like the basement door is wide open.
Exactly. And look, the F5 thing, it's not alone. The brief also flags a critical RCE, that's remote code execution vulnerability. It's affecting over 75,000 WatchGuard security devices. And just a quick reminder, RCE basically means an attacker can run their own malicious code on your device from anywhere without needing permission. So the environment we're looking at here, it's exposed, it's vulnerable, and you can bet the attackers are noticing.
Okay, that really sets the stage. We've got the vulnerability, the exposed infrastructure. Now let's talk about how the big criminal players are actually catching in on this.
Yeah.
Because the ransomware charts, they show a pretty shocking strategic turn. I mean, yeah, Quillen is still way out in front, victim-wise, but the real story isn't the leader. It's the sudden, dramatic, frankly terrifying comeback of a group we thought had mostly disappeared.
Right, we're talking about CL0P. This group, they'd posted almost zero victims since, May? July? Basically quiet all summer. Then almost overnight, boom, a massive reentry. They hit 18 victims in about 3 weeks. That's just a stunning acceleration. Put them right back in the top tier of active groups, just like that.
Wow. Okay, so what's driving that? I mean, they always had the name recognition, but you don't just jump back into the top 5 like that without some kind of major change in how you operate.
That change is absolutely key, and it links right back to what you said about exposed infrastructure. CL0P is leaning hard into what the report calls encryptionless ransomware. Think of it like pure data extortion. They don't even bother encrypting your files anymore.
Why skip the encryption? Isn't that the whole point?
Well, it used to be, but the report suggests more companies have gotten pretty good with backups and recovery, so traditional crypto ransomware, maybe less profitable now.
Ah, okay. So even if I have perfect backups, I can get my data back, sure.
Yeah.
But CL0P gets around that by just stealing the info and threatening to leak it or sell it. So the whole threat model shifts. It's less about recovery time and more about, total reputational meltdown or regulatory fines.
Precisely. And this pure focus, it's incredibly effective. Remember, CL0P is thought to have extorted, over $500 million historically? They clearly see this high-impact reputational threat as the most reliable moneymaker right now.
Okay, let's break down who's really feeling the pain from this pure extortion model. Looking at the sectors, manufacturing and financial services are almost tied for the top targets. But the data on company size, that's what really jumps out. It's critical for our listeners to hear this.
It really is, yeah. When you look at victim size, the overwhelming majority, we're talking almost 4 out of 5, something like 77% are small businesses. Organizations with 500 employees or fewer. They are the main targets for these incredibly sophisticated multi-million-dollar extortion gangs.
Okay, I get the mechanics, but if CL0P is hitting 77% small businesses, how is a smaller company even supposed to deal with that kind of reputational risk? They don't have massive PR teams or huge legal departments to handle a public data leak. The cost of this pure extortion threat feels disproportionately high for them.
Right. That's the really tough reality the brief points to. It forces you to completely rethink your defenses. And geographically, while the U.S. is still number 1, over half the victims, there was a pretty big shift in the global top 5 list this time.
Australia popped up, right? That's
It-
new.
Yeah, exactly. Australia joined the top 5 victim locations in this reporting period. That really suggests some successful targeted campaigns hitting the Asia-Pacific region. It proves that while, yeah, U.S. targets are still profitable, these groups are actively, aggressively looking elsewhere too, diversifying.
Okay, so if they're adapting how they make money, like CL0P's pure extortion,
Yeah.
how are the other players adapting? I mean, the state-sponsored groups, the really sophisticated financial actors, how are they changing their own infrastructure? Let's shift to these cutting-edge tactics,
Yeah.
the new adversaries and their whole quest for resilience.
Right.
Resilience and speed. They're investing heavily in both. Take Star Blizzard, also known as Coal Driver. That's a perfect example of speed.
This is believed to be a Russian intelligence-linked group focused on espionage. They do a lot of spearfishing against Western think tanks, defense contractors, that sort of thing.
And their whole story is just relentless adaptation, isn't it? Keep moving, keep changing.
Exactly. Earlier this year, researchers exposed their main tool, malware, called Lost Keys. What do? They didn't just tweak it. They switched gears incredibly fast. Rolled out completely new malware families, Norrobot, YesRobot, Maber-Robot. Google's analysis, which is cited in the brief, confirms it. Coal Driver is developing and deploying malware faster, more aggressively than ever. Speed itself has become like their main defense against getting caught.
That rapid development cycle is scary enough. But what seems truly, groundbreaking, and maybe a bit shocking, is how the financially motivated groups are using decentralized tech. Tell us about this group, UNC 5142, and its innovative use of the blockchain. Okay, so UNC 5142 is financially driven, right? And they've figured out something pretty fundamental. The easiest way to stop someone from taking down your operation is to put your command structure somewhere that can't be taken down. So they're abusing public blockchain technology to get maximum resilience.
Let's break that down for listeners. Why is that so effective? Normally, if, say, the FBI finds a command and control server, the C2, they get a court order, ISP takes it down, lights out for the malware, right?
That's the traditional way, yeah, the kill switch. But think about it. What if the instructions for the malware, or maybe even the next piece of code it needs to download, what if that lives on an immutable ledger? Something like a public blockchain Solana, maybe Ethereum. There's no single server to seize. The data is spread out globally, and crucially, it can't be changed. It becomes effectively impossible for law enforcement or security companies to just switch it off.
Wow, that really is maximum resilience built right in. And the malware they use for this,
That's RadThief, also known as Radamanthys. It's an info stealer, and it's specifically using smart contracts on the blockchain to distribute its later stages. It means the malware's critical communication channel is basically outside the reach of normal security tools and governance.
all right, let's pivot now. We need to talk about the immediate critical threats, the stuff that needs patching yesterday, and also some of these genuinely next-level malware families that are popping up.
Absolutely. We have to highlight the extreme urgency around a really stunning vulnerability in Microsoft's Windows Server Update Service, WSUS. This was so bad, Microsoft pushed out an emergency out-of-band update, which they really don't do lightly.
Why the panic? What made this one so critical?
Access. It's all about the access it gave. This vulnerability allowed an unauthenticated actor, meaning someone without a password, not logged in, to achieve remote code execution with system privileges. That's it. Game over. Full control of the server. An attacker could just run code with the highest possible authority. If you were running affected versions, the only move was to patch immediately. No excuses.
And it wasn't just Microsoft, right? The brief mentioned a whole slew of vendors with actively exploited vulnerabilities. It's a broad problem.
That's right. The list of CVEs being actively hit wasn't limited to Microsoft at all. We saw critical flaws under attack in Apple products, Broadcom VMware, and even major e-commerce platforms like Adobe Commerce, which you might know as Magento, and AEM Forms. And
Okay.
it just confirms defenders are basically fighting a war on too many fronts at once.
Okay, the brief also had some really fascinating details on new malware families. Stuff that highlights just how technically sophisticated these actors are getting. They seem really focused on next-gen stealth and that resilience theme we keep hitting.
Yeah, let's start with ClearShot. This is a multi-stage loader, and it's used by that same blockchain group, UNC 5142. They target vulnerable WordPress sites, super common entry point, right? And use them to host the first stage of ClearShot. But then, and this is the clever part, the malware loads its second stage directly from the public blockchain.
Whoa. Okay, so they use an old, easy vulnerability WordPress to deliver this super modern, highly resilient payload. That's disturbingly efficient.
It is. And then to actually infect the user's machine, the endpoint, they use a social engineering trick called click fix. Basically, they con the victim into clicking a link, maybe pretending it's to fix some issue, and that click gives the initial foothold for the blockchain-based payload to deploy.
That's terrifyingly clever.
Yeah.
But maybe not as mind-bending as the evasion used by Glassworm. This one sounded almost like science fiction.
Glassworm is... Yeah, it's genuinely revolutionary in how it hides. It's the first worm we've seen spreading through VS Code extensions in the open VSX marketplace, so it targets developers directly. Yeah. But the real innovation, how it evades detection. It hides malicious code using invisible characters.
Invisible characters? You mean like hidden messages in the code itself? Steganography for source code?
Yeah, exactly like that. It uses specific Unicode characters that look completely identical to a human looking at the code. Even basic security tools might miss them. But these characters change how the code actually runs. It defeats both the human eye and simple scanners. The malicious part hides in plain sight inside what looks like totally legitimate code. And guess what? Tying back to resilience, it controls the machines it infects through the Solana blockchain for its C2 network.
Wait, hold on. So they're exploiting how we read code, the limitations of human perception, not just how computers execute it.
Yeah.
That's next-level operational security for the bad guys.
It really is. It forces a complete rethink of how you even review code. And finally, the brief touched on an issue with a macOS threat, something that raises specific concerns about Apple's own built-in security, right? That would be Odyssey Stealer, a macOS info stealer. Now, the malware itself isn't necessarily groundbreaking, but how it's being deployed, that's the worry. Samples of Odyssey have been found out in the wild, code signed with a valid Apple developer ID.
Which means what exactly for the average user?
It's like having a fake ID that looks absolutely perfect. When software is signed with a valid Apple developer ID and notarized by Apple, it basically tells macOS's built-in security gatekeeper, hey, this is legit, I'm vouched for. So it bypasses those standard checks. It allows the malware to be downloaded and run without being blocked or even flagged as suspicious. It shows attackers are going to extreme lengths, like stealing valid developer keys, just to get past platform security.
Okay, so let's try to pull all these threads together. We've talked about Star Blizzard speed, UNC 5142 using blockchains, CL0P ditching encryption for pure extortion, those thousands of exposed F5 devices. What's the bottom line here? What connects all this?
I think the overarching trend is pretty clear. Adversaries are aggressively prioritizing, really, three things: resilience, speed, and high-impact extortion. Resilience, so they can't be taken down easily. That's the blockchain C2 stuff. Speed, so they can iterate faster than defenders can keep up. That's ColdDriver. And high-impact extortion, the pure data theft model confirms that the main threat for you, the listener, is shifting. It's moving away from just internal recovery headaches towards external risk, public exposure, regulatory fines, brand damage. That's the new battleground.
And just to add context, we should quickly mention some of the wider news items the brief included. There was that huge Prosper data breach, 17.6 million accounts. Just underscores the sheer volume of data at risk.
Right. And then you see the consequences, like Experian getting fined $3.2 million for mass collecting personal data. That reinforces the regulatory pressure that actually makes data theft so valuable for extortionists.
Also that Pin to Own Ireland event.
Wow.
Hackers found 34 0 days on day 1, 56 on day 2. That's just a stark reminder of how much undiscovered attack surface is still out there, even in popular software.
And let's not forget, the basics still work. The brief mentioned LinkedIn phishing, targeting finance execs with fake board meeting invites, still trying to get that initial foothold through simple deception.
So this deep dive into the Byer-Nichols brief, it paints a picture, doesn't it? It's unequivocally clear. We're in a rapidly accelerating, technically sophisticated threat environment. The infrastructure is exposed, and the adversaries are well-funded, agile, and frankly, quite innovative.
Which really brings us to a final provocative thought for you to chew on. Given this definitive shift by major groups like CL0P towards encryptionless ransomware, focusing purely on data extortion, and knowing that almost 80% of their victims are small and mid-market companies, the question becomes, what's the real cost of cyber defense today? If the number one threat is public exposure and brand destruction, not just system downtime, should your defensive strategy now focus just as much on things like rigorous data separation, internal risk management, having a solid crisis communication plan ready to go? Is that just as important now as having good backups? Because maybe the target isn't really your systems anymore. Maybe it's your reputation.
That is a critical question and one that demands immediate attention. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Reach out to us at jbuyer.com for comments and questions. Follow us at Byer Company on social media, and if you'd be so kind, please rate and review us in your podcast app.